And we're recording. Hi, Karem. We're so happy
Hi.
to have you.
Thanks
Uh,
for
yeah, so we'll start with just kind of giving a brief overview about yourself, kind of your path, education, current career, and then we'll get to student questions. So,
Okay. Sounds good.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna, before I started all of this, I would have really liked all this information. So I'm just gonna try to give a rundown on everything that I would have wanted to know. But yeah, my path was interesting. I think I was always interested in psychology. I thought very psychologically. I was a psychologically minded child from the get-go. So I think I knew that that was something I was interested in for years. I was always analyzing like my friends' families, and I learned about birth order and how that's impacting. And I found it interesting to see how people were raised and how that impacted them later on in life. And so I kind of had my own theories growing up. And by the time I got to college, I was really interested in psychology. And I think a career test that I took, which I would recommend that for everybody, is take that personality career test. And I can't remember what it's called, but there's some good ones, and it'll actually tell you what would be really good for you. And it's kind of interesting. There were two things I was interested in: psychology and news broadcasting, and those were the two careers that came for me. So it's like, okay. Um, yeah, so at the time, San Diego State was pretty impacted. I think I said this in my bio. And so I ended up with sociology, which is great, study of people. And I think at that time, I just didn't know that I probably could have gone straight into a master's program. And I knew I wanted to make money. So I just ended up taking a market research, and then wasn't into that. I was all about finding my passion, I think. Got into sales, and there's some questions on here about the sales position and how that helped. And I really feel like that's when I grew as a person in learning how to really interact with people and meeting people for the first time, how to present myself, how to build rapport, how to gain that trust. And if you think about it, it's really similar to what you do in therapy. If the person you're interacting with doesn't trust you, they're not going to tell you, their life story. If I approached someone I had to deal with, I was selling wine, and if they had a body language that was like they were busy, I wasn't going to go and force them to talk to me because that's my job. I would say, hey, listen, when can I come back? Looks like you're busy. So noticing where people are at based on what they're saying and their behavior and their body language is important to learn in this field. Because number one, most important thing is building rapport and having them trust you. So that, I feel like those years were, even though I didn't like sales at all, I'm very honest. If I don't believe in a product, then it's hard for me to sell it. But I did learn how to sell myself per se, and to cater how I approached people so that they wanted to see me the next time. And then maybe little by little, they would start just saying, yeah, I'll buy this from you. And that's the way therapy is too. You want them to come back. You want them to feel like this is the place where they feel safe to talk about their problems and have you help and not judge. So that's what I learned from sales, and decided I'm going somewhere else with that. And I got into cooking, and I love to cook. So that was really fun because I got to teach cooking classes, and it was really good for my self-esteem, and it really helped me to be able to speak and instruct people and feel comfortable with people. That was the main thing. I mean, I felt like, I was on stage. I had to, I don't know, it really formed a certain aspect of my personality that made me feel like if I can do this, I can do anything. So that was great. And it was really, I'm a creative person. So, it's good to know about your brain and what you're good at and what you like so that you can use that in everything you do. So I was able to, like today, I don't mind speaking because I had that experience. I love to teach. I hope to teach classes one day at the college level because I have that experience and I really love it. So let's see, after that, and I grew up playing music. I played piano and I sang. So I decided, I want to do that. Yeah, you play piano?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Love
What are
it.
you playing?
Now I'm trying to learn Life on Mars. uh,
Oh,
David Bowie. We'll see if how that goes.
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I know I just downloaded a new piano piece. And you know, music, there's an aspect of that that's very integral into um, self-care and helping. I mean, people go into psychology and they use music and therapy, you
Mhm.
know, so you can use your skills and your talents and integrate them. That's what's so great. Some people use yoga, you know,
Yeah.
for therapy. Some people, I mean, there's so many things you can do based on what you're good at. So just know what you're interested in, what you're good at. Um, and you got to like people, of course.
Of course.
So
That is really important. Like,
it's important.
you think you love people, but if they get on your nerves very quickly, you might want to consider research or,
Yeah, yeah. Or come back to it when you're a little
Yeah.
older. Like I, you know, when I was ready, yeah, and then I had kids, and so that makes you super patient because now you're dealing with these, you know, these little things, not things, but you know, they're there, they're on you, so you got to become selfless, and that helped me to have more empathy and compassion for people. I could see how difficult it was to be raised, or to my goal was to be such a good mom because I knew that these children, the way they were being raised now is going to impact them as adults. So that goes into the whole, there's a psychology development question in here that I want to answer. I think it's wonderful, whoever asked this question about, you know, it sounds like you're very set in this child development psychology. And that is so wonderful because that's where people start, obviously. So if we can touch those people's lives, these children's lives, um, so what you would want to do is, you know, go into psychology, obviously graduate with that. There's a lot of master's programs out there
Oh, yeah.
specifically for that. But I do know people that went through like my program as a marriage and family therapist that are working with children because that's part of it. It's family, it's children. I had to gain clinical hours with children. So I did therapy with children, even though that's not my passion. I'm more teens and up, but I got that experience and I got to see what it's, you know, what they go through and how a child therapist can help through play therapy to help them to understand their emotions and all of that. So, you know, if you're interested in children, you'll figure out your path. You'll ask questions and you'll go in that route and you'll gain your experience in that way. Yeah, so let's see, where am I now? So then I got back into music and I met somebody while I was in that field. And she was going to National University for marriage and family therapy. So I felt like it was meant to be. It all came full circle. And now I was like, this is the program for me. So I got into that. And someone was also asking about, how did you know this was your passion? And it was, you know, by this time in my life, I knew this is what I wanted to do because I had all these experiences leading up to it. And so once I entered into the program, I was gung ho and it was so much fun. Imagine every single class really being interested in loving it. You know, when you're going to college, you're filling requirements and you're doing essays about history and blah, blah.
Well, time.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, there was so many things I had to do just to get that degree, but I didn't really care about. But now I'm going in every class. So the way National University was set up, so I'll explain about that because I think somebody was asking. This was a wonderful program for me because I had 2 kids and I was able to still work during the day. I taught piano lessons and I was part of a little kids band, you know, and so I did that kind of for fun, but also to have a job. And then I would go Tuesday and Thursday nights, right? So it would be from like 5 to 10 on Tuesday and Thursday. And I would do 1 class a month. So if it was human sexuality, that would be it. And I did that for a year and a half. So each month there was a new class. And that was a great kind of structure for me in my life. And every university, obviously, you can go full-fledged just like you're doing now. But there's those options too. So yeah, I enjoyed it very much and did really well, much better than I did in my undergrad, way better. So within that program, at the end of it, there's something called practicum. Okay, so practicum is basically practice. And what you do is now you add one more class to what you're already doing, and it's called practicum class. So you actually go out and find somewhere where you can work. Sometimes they're paid, actually, but mine wasn't. Most of them aren't when it's practicum.
Yeah.
So the university, it has relationships with different places, and of course they take on this rookie therapist, and this is where you learn, and you have your clients, but you also have supervision. So while you're doing practicum, you're meeting once a week, either in a group or individually, usually a group, and you are presenting your client cases, and you are getting your practicum hours to graduate from the university.
Awesome.
So that's what practicum's all about. I had a couple great experiences. I had actually 3 practicums. I was like, oh, I want to try this. I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
And it was great. I worked with co-occurring disorder groups. I had my own group that I ran, and we would just talk about their struggles. And I did that. You know, that's what's great about marriage and family therapy. It's group work. It's couples. You can work with children, individuals, family. It's so spread, you know, there's so many options. And I think that you figure out what you're good at and what you want to do within that.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to keep talking if that's cool with you.
Yeah, please. Go for it. I love it.
Okay. So that was a great experience. And so I was able to graduate. And then after that, I had heard about EMDR somewhere in there. I think it was at that site where I was meeting for supervision at my practicum site, and someone brought it up, and I said, what is that? That sounds interesting. Mm-hmm. And it just clicked with who I am. Like, I always have come from kind of a psychodynamic, which means youth. It's like experiences from youth impact who you are today. And I've always believed that. And I also believe in attachment theory, which means like the attachments you've made, you know, the healthy or the unhealthy ones that you've made with a primary caregiver really can impact the way you interact with people when you're older and the relationships
100%.
You have. You know? So that's kind of where my belief, so you kind of form your own belief as you're learning all of this. And they're throwing a lot of different theories at you in your program. A lot of different theories. And sometimes it's overwhelming because they're like, what's your modality? What do you believe in, Karem? I'm like, I don't know. I believe stuff happens and then you're like this, you know? So I would just try to, you know, form something, and you don't try to stress about it because you'll get there, and you got to see every class and every experience and every job that you have as making you a better clinician in the future. So I think I want to stress the fact, don't stress out about your path. There were questions about, well, would you suggest someone go do this job and that job or this job? It's kind of wherever you're led. That's what's cool about life. It's like an opportunity comes up and you kind of decide, do I want to do that or not? And it could be in line with psychology, or it could be something else. Yeah. But it's all going to give you more experience and more insight about yourself and how you relate to others. All of it. Yeah. So I used to stress out. When I was younger, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. And what am I going to do? And where's my path going to go? And I just wish I didn't, because it's really, it doesn't have to be that stressful at all.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important for students to understand, is that like for the majority of people, there's not a linear path to get from undergrad to your career for the rest of your life. In fact, most people will change their career 5 times on average in a year right now. So it's okay. You always have the chance to go back. You're not solidified in one area after you get your BA, right? Like when you got your BA in sociology, and yet you went to a master's of psychology graduate program.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't know that. I didn't know you could graduate with any degree and then go on to get your master's. They don't discriminate, really. And I think that somebody also asked, you know, how were you a good candidate or something when I was applying? So as far as that is, like, I feel like I was so excited and so ready to learn and so eager that they could just feel that. I mean, it was pretty, you know, and I know that that's what got me in. And I think because I've always thought in this way, I was able to just kind of talk about my experiences and how psychology and helping people was important to me and why I would be good fit for this, you know. I think you just really have to know yourself, know your passions, know your strengths. That's the number one thing. Know your strengths and be comfortable talking about your strengths.
Absolutely.
That really, you know, you are kind of selling yourself to everybody, really, you know. So the better you know yourself, you know, if I don't know how well I would have done if I went right into a master's program after. I didn't really know myself back then. I was like young. I was an only child. I needed to experience life more. I might have been scared in situations where I had to deal with, you know, someone who's suicidal or something like that. You know, I was able to handle things more with more experience under my belt. So it was good for me personally.
I think as you like get older and do experience more kind of experiences, if you will, you learn how to tailor each experience to relevant experience, right? If you know what you can take away from what you're doing now and apply it to what your future goals are, you can sell that. It can be,
Yeah.
I say this a lot in my classes, in and out can be relevant experience.
Yes.
Especially in San Diego, where it's a very diverse place. You have to work in teams, you have to collaborate, you have to have cultural competency, right? Like all of those
All
are
of
relevant.
Yes. You can take any job you've had and cater it to what you want in the next job, as far as when you're selling yourself in an interview or anything. Yeah, you make it sound perfect. It's like, oh yeah, I've done that.
Exactly. Like you may not have thought this, but I know how to make this relevant for you.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. But it's true, actually. It's not like we're lying about any of this. It's true, like every experience in life. So hopefully that's the message that, you know, that we've conveyed today anyway, is one, don't stress about the path. And two, every experience, it just enriches, you know, your future career. So where am I now?
Let's see. So we got a little bit through kind of the structure of the program. We were still kind of going through that. Yeah.
Okay, so once I graduated, that was it. I graduated, and a friend of mine who actually was already working in the field. I know there were questions about that. You can find a job in the field even without the master's degree. So, for example, she worked in like case management in a program in a nonprofit where she was helping kind of counsel but just support people. So there's plenty of jobs out there. She was already making money in this job. So by the time she graduated, she moved up or she got another position within the company. So that's when I called her and I was like, hey, you know, is your company hiring? And tell me more about it. And I did hear that because EMDR training is pretty expensive. And so I knew I wanted it. I had already heard about it and I was like already attached to that idea. They paid for it eventually. I had to stay. A lot of things happened and it was like, oh, next year, Karem. And I was like, that's fine. I'm still getting my hours. Okay, next year, Karem. I'm like, that's fine. I didn't think I was going to be at this job for, I guess it was 5 years.
Wow.
At this nonprofit. But it was great because I got all my hours done. So I should probably talk about that. As soon as I started at Vista Hill, so Vista Hill is a big agency that has multiple programs, okay? The one program I worked for was called Incredible Families. What was cool about this program, there were 3 parts to it. We worked with people in the system, basically CWS. So it would be parents or a parent, somebody who had their children removed for different reasons, you know, drug use, they were, you know, abandoned, the children were abandoned, so many different reasons.
To be clear, CWS is the Child Welfare Care.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, Child Welfare Services. So if you ever suspect that a child, an elder, is being, you know, abused or neglected, this is who you would call. You would call the actual Child Welfare Services line, and you would say, you know, I saw this, I saw that. I've actually, before I got into the program, I noticed something and I called them up. And it's just good to do if you see something like that, because it goes on the record. It might not
Yeah.
move the children yet, but at least there's some kind of record started there. It's not coming out when something bad happens. So you might be um, preventing something bad that could happen in the future.
So it's not quite substantiated yet, but it kind of puts
Mhm.
that flag there.
Yeah, some kind of flag. And so they'll come out and do some interviews and see and check the scene out. Sometimes they'll say thank you for the information and they won't go forward with anything. So anyway, these people actually had their children removed, and the court. So now the children are property of, not property, but in the hands of the court, right? And you know about this, Cassandra, because this is what you did.
Yeah.
So chime in anytime about this, but I learned a lot about the system, which was great for me because I didn't really know much about it at all. So the court says you need to have this, and this based on it. So they create a case plan for each parent. Mm-hmm. And the case plan will say, hey, you have to, go to drug rehab. You have to do this many parenting classes. So and then also do supervised visitations with your kids, which is just awful because it means they can't even see their kids unless someone's there watching them, right? So our program, and I don't know like our time frame or anything, I don't want to get too.
All good.
We're good. Okay. So our program basically satisfied a couple of those needs, right? They could come, actually 3 of the needs. They would come to a supervised visitation that we set up at like some school or whatever location we were at, and basically had tables of families, and we would supervise. And they'd have a nice sit down with their kids. We provided games and they had dinner. We always had a catered meal. They actually loved it. In the beginning, sometimes they'd be really resistant with us. And then by the end, they're like, we don't want it to end. It was great. So every week they'd come to these visits. And after the visit, they would have their parenting class. So I was in charge of overseeing the visit. And then I also, this is big stuff. I just got into the field and now I'm supervising these visitations. Okay. I mean, I freaked out inside. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? It's like, I felt like a little kid. I was like, okay, I got to act all, but it was great experience because I was in charge of these visits. And then afterwards I would teach a parenting class. So they had to go through this 15-week parenting course to basically help them understand the importance of being there for their children. Yeah. And we would provide a curriculum that would help them. We'd do videos and they do, role plays and different things to help them. And there were some parents really impacted. I felt like there were times where, wow, this parent really had an aha moment. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I would go a little further and talk with them on the side and say, tell me about how you were raised. Tell me what your mom did. And 10 times out of 10, they were raising their children the way their parent was raising them.
Absolutely.
And so it's this cycle, right? So if they could have these moments of clarity, it was wonderful, just within this parenting group. And then the third thing is we provided therapy for the children. So the child would come in, the foster parent would bring them into our office, and then a therapist would. So I did that too. So I was in charge of 3 things. One thing I do want to talk about, because someone asked about it, is the challenges of getting the clinical hours and actually working within this nonprofit. Okay. Can I tell you what I hated about it?
Yeah. That's definitely helpful.
Paperwork. The county.
Yeah, that's what all of the people doing clinical work right now, they're like, you really think about it as just like these interactions, but there is a whole nother side where you're doing a lot of paperwork.
It was, I got to the point, and luckily, once I get into a groove, I know the formula. I'm just like, bam, bam, bam. And I would just get the paperwork done as soon as I could, because if you fall behind, that's not good. The county they want their notes. Yeah. So this is a whole other explanation of stuff. But basically, county wants proof that you provided a service because they are paying the nonprofit a certain amount of money based on how many clients that we have in the program. So we have to provide proof and interventions and all the stuff that we do through a county program. So you're on the computer just like, you know. And the other thing is the county would come by and audit all of our paperwork and make sure our files were in line. And it would be stressful because it's like, hey, Karem, the county pulled your file from your client and they're analyzing it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure you put all the right interventions in your client plan. And I'd be like, oh my God,
Why me?
yeah, why'd they pick 3 of my files and only 2 of hers?
Yeah, it's like when you're driving and there's a cop behind you, even though you know you're not doing anything wrong, you're just like 10 and 2, 10 and 2.
Yeah. So that was stressful. So I wanted to tell whoever asked about that. And the other challenge with, so I was gaining my hours. So with every client that I saw, whether it was at the family visitation, so that counted as like time where it was like family therapy sometimes. We'd sit with the families and we'd provide a little like support. I would help them interact, you know, and make sure. So that was kind of like a family therapy situation. So I was able to count those hours. I was able to count hours that I saw children individually in therapy. I also could count paperwork for a little bit. Like they give you that spot. There's the Board of the Behavioral Sciences. So when you are in a job, you register, you know, once you get out of, and you graduate, you register to be an intern. They call it an associate now, marriage and family therapist associate. Okay. And basically now you are saying, okay, I'm seeing this many clients, I'm getting supervised. So the total number of hours to become, or actually to qualify to take the licensing exam is 3,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means you need 3,000 cumulative hours. The majority is face-to-face. There is some report writing stuff and different things like that. There's 104 hours you need for supervision. So if you break that down, if you had a full caseload, you could do it in 2 years. That's not realistic.
Right. It
usually takes about 3.5, 4 if you're going really slow.
Yes.
So there's that question answered.
Mm-hmm.
So you're basically tracking on these forms and you're getting the supervision. And supervision is basically going in, talking about your clients. They're giving you feedback and that type of thing. Yeah. And so once you get all those hours accumulated, which that's a challenge because sometimes you can't get enough supervision to cover all your clients.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain number of hours of supervision per like 10 clients. You need 1 hour for 10 clients. So if you can't get 2 hours and you have 20 clients that week, you lost 10 clients. Ugh. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, so that's a challenge, is trying to get the hours. And then once you do get all your hours and you submit it to the Board of Behavioral Sciences, then, you know, they take their sweet time.
Yes.
And you're waiting. You're like, can I take the test? And then they say, you can take the test. And then you're like, oh no, now I got to study.
Never stops. You will always have another test to take.
Yeah. So then, you know, my family knows I would be in the bedroom just like studying for this test. And then, you know, took it. I got through it. I survived. It's very rewarding once you do. And you're like, wow, I did it. But, you know, you have to know that every experience before that was my own end goal. Mm-hmm. But I was trying to appreciate the learning process along the way because I didn't want to be licensed and feel like I didn't know anything.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. So. And what did that kind of look like? So from going to like classes, what were the class structures like? And then kind of trying to take what you've learned in a class setting and apply it clinically.
I don't know. I think it just is all in there, and you might be able to access it at different times. Mm-hmm. But once you're in a job, it's completely different. Yeah. You could go back to your class notes and say, okay, what kind of cool interventions did they teach me in that child, you know, therapy class or that? But for the most part, you're just kind of learning on the job, you know.
It's art, right? Like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's there. I'm not saying it's not. That's why you go to school, because there's a lot of stuff that you don't know, and you don't realize how much you learn when you're in taking those classes, you know?
Absolutely.
And a great thing that I think from my perspective that I learned is just this even further acceptance of people on a whole, of struggles, and like my sexuality class. So cool to have people come in who are transgender speaking about their experiences, with the just the whole process, and their parents coming in. And so it just makes you appreciate and understand more when,
Absolutely.
all setting you up to be a therapist, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
we've kind of talked a bit about this, but like how important kind of cultural competency is, whether that be
mhm.
regarding gender identity, ethnicity, age, even that kind of.
Mhm.
Did you have to
Yeah,
take
and
specific classes on in that
mhm.
area?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. In the master's program, you take that and you continue that. That's a requirement for your license and to be an intern. It's called associate now.
Yeah.
So you are required to take cultural competency. Even in my job, I had to do it working at the nonprofit. We had to do it every year, just to make sure that we were remembering,
Absolutely.
about the various, yeah.
That's
So,
so cool. Um,
yeah.
let's see. Where would
Let's
I?
see. Yeah, I wanted to, um, I was going to talk about EMDR kind of after all of this,
Yeah.
because I know
Um,
questions about that. I talked about national.
I guess maybe 26. So, in your experience being in LMFT, were there situations where you felt it was like kind of beyond your experience, or how did you handle these
uh,
cases?
yeah.
You feel like the training really prepared you for kind of anything or your experiences?
Yeah, no, it was great. I've always felt that I had support. That's what's great about, that's why you want to be an intern,
Yeah.
because you are getting constant supervision and support. If you don't know something, you could literally be like, I don't know, and you can go ask. So you never feel like you have to do everything. There were times at the family visitations where I was in charge, where I had to quick make a decision, and then we would process it later. Okay, what could we have done better? How could we have supported this family better? What can we do next? But it was never like you did wrong, or
Yeah.
you're going to harm this person. You were just doing what you knew at the moment. And
Yeah.
so I never really felt, there were a couple times, of course, that I was like, oh, what if I don't know what to do?
Yeah.
And we all have those fears. And I do want to say that I did get paid, so you can get this paid internship. I got a salary,
That's
people. So when they say that you have to work for free, that's not true.
which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's good to have all that support, before because I'm still learning so much. I don't feel like I'm far from knowing everything. I think that it's, talking to other therapists, we're always trying to like learn more and be better. And you never know it all. And it's okay. As long as you're following the lead of your client and the person you're helping, and you're letting them tell you their experience, then
Mhm.
you're doing the job, because
Yeah.
we don't know. They're the experts of their life.
Mhm.
We're not. We can say, well, I've heard of somebody who went through something similar, but really we didn't live their life experience. So it's up to them to kind of figure out, and we're there to support that and make them feel comfortable with them making the decisions. So,
Yeah, I think another common kind of misconception about therapy, and I brought this up in a couple of interviews, is that like therapists give advice, but really
mhm.
you should not be doing that.
No,
Kind of in the code of ethics, and if you were to give advice and it was mistook, like that's a big
no blame.
problem.
In fact, I had a client recently come in, and it was, he was his first session. He wanted me to tell him what to do.
Yep.
He didn't like the fact that I said, that's not what I do. And
Yeah.
he didn't come back, and I knew he wouldn't, because I was like, I'm not here to tell you what to do, because how am I supposed to know what you should do? Oh,
Exactly.
well, I thought that's your job. Well, no,
No,
it's not.
it's your job to help them think about the ways they're approaching things, right? Like come to your own decision, which is sometimes harder to confront than having someone, lay it out for you. It's like, well, why
Right.
do you think that's the appropriate step, right?
Yep.
Rather than like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that.
Mhm. Just like a mother telling their child,
Yes.
you need to do this. And they're like, well, why do I have to do that? But if they come to the realization on their own, well, maybe it's better if I do this because of this, they're more sold into it and they're more motivated to do it. Clients are way more motivated when they come up with the idea on their own
Yeah.
rather than you telling them what to do. They won't always get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It leads to more long-term change to have them figure work through their own, behavior cognition issues than if you're just,
Hmm.
this is your problem. Let's do this.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, why am I doing that again? Yeah.
Right? Exactly. And then kind of going into so what you've worked at both like a private practice as well as in a nonprofit. So what is
Yeah.
the difference between those? What does that look like?
Yeah. So as far as moving on, once that job, actually the program ended. So I had already started I've always wanted my own private practice. And I was like, well, once I'm licensed for a few years, I'm going to look into that. And so what that looks like, and there's pros and cons, obviously, to everything. Um, but really it's about getting the space. So I found I didn't want to rent a place all
Yeah.
to myself because I'm like, well, if I'm paying all this money and I don't have clients. So you kind of, so I started getting some random clients. So I said, you know what, I better rent out. So I sublet a couple hours a week at, a place. Well, in the mornings, more than a couple hours. And so basically I was paying her for the hour that I was there, and then the client was paying me. Now I plan, and the way I've done it so far to not make it so complicated, since I'm still a baby in this whole private practice thing, is I don't want to go through insurance. That sounds very overwhelming and at this point right now. So I would just take the full cash, right? And many people do this their entire time in private practice. And I'll probably do the same. I probably won't ever deal with insurance. The one thing I have done for clients is I will create what's called a super bill, and I will tally up like all of the sessions and how much they paid me, and then they can submit that to the insurance and get reimbursed. But that's about as far as I'll go.
Yeah.
Now, the other private practice that I work for, which the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm not ready to go 100% into private practice, and I don't know if I ever will be. I kind of like the idea of being part of something
Yeah.
and, being part of a community. I'm very social, so I do like the collaboration is such a wonderful thing. I want to be able to talk to someone in my office about like my client and what to do next and have meetings and stuff, just so we can all, because, I have heard that it can be very lonely.
Yeah.
To be in a private practice, you go into your office and then someone comes in and then they leave and then that's it. You're just doing that all day. So I'll probably always be a part of something else as I build my private practice.
Mhm.
And so yeah, and going through these other private practices, learning more about how to actually do it effectively. There's a lot of software you can use for billing and scheduling and all of that stuff. It's so easy now. It is awesome. Yeah. Very
And
good.
let's see. So how do you and like you said, kind of fairly new in this, but like how do you avoid burnout? So we hear burnout's really common, especially
Yeah.
when you're dealing with like trauma, etc.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of touched on this, like part of it is having the ability to decompress with other people around you that are
Mhm.
also treating similar populations. But do you have any specifics that you kind of try to use?
Yeah. I think what's key is when you're going into, this career is trying to learn what helps you decompress from the get-go. Because once you make that a habit and it's just the way you decompress or the way you kind of separate from the job and the clients, then you'll always do it and it'll become second nature. So for me, I realized this is what I did. I would always find something that you like, obviously. If it's music or exercise or running, they talk, when you go through programs, they'll talk a lot about self-care because you have to take care of yourself in order to be able to help others, right? So whether that's it's good to go to your own therapy, work out your own issues. it can be really hard when countertransference, you'll learn about what that means. Countertransference is basically you see something that's similar to what you've experienced with someone in your life in the client,
Yeah.
right? So now you're responding to that client in the same pattern, interactional pattern as you did with this person. And it happened to me once hardcore, and I was like, whoa, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It,
It's
it,
crazy because you
it's,
always want to find connections of yourself and others, right? Like that's just
uh-huh,
like human nature.
yeah.
It's important to kind of check that because again, we all had a different past to get to that similar point. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I touched on that, because that's like a hard thing that I think somebody was asking about, is probably the countertransference aspect. It doesn't happen all the time, but you just have to be self-aware, and the self-care is really important. So what I would do is, I'd be dealing with all these families and these children. You feel bad for them because they're not living with their parents. That was a lot. The people I worked with, some people actually had harder times than others, right? So, you know, for whatever reason, I feel really, really blessed that I didn't have that difficult of a time. Really, I would come home and I would get my comfies on, and I did that every time. And it was almost like I was taking off that work layer, and it went in the laundry, and then I had my family, and that I would focus on that dinner, my kids, whatever it was. So whatever, if you can be present in your life when you leave the job, that's going to help you. And with burnout as well, because you're not carrying that with you into, your dreams and waking up worrying about it. Because that's where burnout comes in.
absolutely. Where it's
Yeah.
just carrying it around on your back
Mm-hmm.
all the time, letting
All
it
the time.
seep into all your relationships, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's really important to kind of check yourself and check in with yourself daily.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
Oh,
even telling people around you,
yeah.
tell me if I'm acting, like getting too emotional or whatever it is. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Even, yeah, I think that's really important too, to like acknowledge that, like, it's been a hard week. Like, please let me know if I am projecting these issues or like,
mm-hmm.
whatever.
Exactly.
Let's see.
How much time do we have? A little bit.
Um,
Are we okay?
yeah, we're totally fine on time. We could go for
Okay.
like another 20 or so minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Should we move on to EDMR or?
Yeah, we can do EMDR.
Oh,
So
EMDR, sorry.
don't worry. And I can't even, the D always gets me. So it
Yeah.
stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So that's what it is. And the misconception about EMDR is it's what do they call it, hypnosis or something like that, or like warping the brain or changing something about a person, or brainwashing or that type of thing. It's nothing like that at all. And just to give you a little rundown, because I think the more people who are interested in the field who get trained in EMDR, I feel so passionate about it and the way it can help people, that we need more and more EMDR therapists. We really do. And because you can use it in your everyday life, you can actually use it for a friend or your family member or something like that once you're trained, and it can help. So basically, Francine Shapiro, she invented it. Super brilliant woman who, I think she was not only a doctorate in psychology, but just she had a degree in like neurology, and she's just, knew a lot about the brain synapses and different things. And so basically she went on a walk one day and she had all these negative thoughts, and she started to, when you walk, it's called bilateral, right? So you're exercising both sides of the body and both sides of the brain. Mm-hmm. So whenever you're walking, you're kind of accessing both sides. So she was looking from the left to the right, left to the right, to the left to the right. And she noticed that as she's thinking these negative thoughts, they were getting less negative. They were getting a little more positive, and they weren't impacting her as much. So she started to test it on herself, on her family, friends. She started doing like, studies, and got a lot of people. And she came up with this technique, and she realized that, so it kind of mimics REM sleep, right? So when we are, sleep is so important to heal the body. Also, the brain is healing, right? So when we go to sleep, we process what happened that day, that week. And when you see someone's eyes move back and forth when they're sleeping, they're accessing the left and the right sides of the brain. That's how you can access, or that's how you can process the best, actually. If you're just using one side, it's not going to. You need both sides.
Right.
So that's where the bilateral stimulation comes in. So the eye movements, basically, and I have a little pointer. Oh, it's somewhere else. It's like in my purse. I carry it around everywhere. But basically, you know, when you're like, I will have somebody track with their eyes like this, right? And keep their head still. And when they're going back and forth while they are focusing on whatever we're targeting, it starts to, it's the crazy experience. I love it so much because I see people go through this path of memories, right?
Yeah.
So they might start, so basically what EMDR does is it targets these past traumatic events, and they don't have to be hugely traumatic. They can just be something that has impacted them. So say at 5 years old, something happened to you. All of the sights, the sounds, the sensations, the negative cognitions, and all of that get trapped in a little bubble in your brain, like a neural network in your brain. And so if you find yourself in the here and now reacting a little too harshly to this situation, it's because your brain is accessing that bubble, and it's bringing forth all of those intense emotions and everything from that bubble and using it in the information of today, and it's maladaptive. So you can, that's why you see someone fly off the handle about something. It's coming from a time in their past and hasn't been adaptively processed. So it's stuck there. That's why people keep getting triggered by situations.
Generalize a lot of our trauma to normalcy in life, right? Like people coming home and hearing a door slam, especially if they were in combat, like they generalize that to all of a sudden, like my amygdala, my limbic system's overactive and I'm now ready to kind of fight, right?
Right.
So kind of taking that and leveling it out and having you reprocess those things kind of, right?
Definitely. Yes, because if you notice, there's no control. It's just an immediate reaction response. It's not like anything's thought through. That's why you're right. At the more extreme end of the trauma, someone who has been in combat and they have the experience that's just set in their brain, they come back and they try to, a smell, something someone says can trigger that, and they change in an instant.
Yep.
And they can't control it because it's just their brain is using that information and saying, help, fight or flight, right?
Yep. Protective mechanisms.
It's all protection. So what this EMDR does is it helps to desensitize those experiences, and it brings forward new information. And so what I see people do is starting at that initial memory. And so, someone asks, what does a session look like? Well, there's a lot of preparation. There's 8 phases of EMDR. But there's a lot of preparation in the beginning to kind of figure out what those impactful triggers are, right? So if there's a really bad experience, you want to sometimes pick the first and the worst, right? So you go to those first, and someone will start with that. And with it, there's body sensations that go along with it. But once they start doing the bilateral stimulations, all of a sudden they'll say, oh, I remember a time when blah, 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 blah. And then I'll just say, okay, go with that. And then they'll jump to the next thing. And they'll say, this is kind of random, and that it isn't random. Your brain is going through each memory that is associated with that initial traumatic memory and event. So it I see it as like a linear, it's like this pathway that starts here and goes through until it's all cleared out. Yep. Until at the end, they're able to make it's more adaptive, and they're able to put a positive cognition to it. So instead of feeling like I'm worthless, now they start to believe that I'm worth something,
Yeah.
So we're,
oh, sorry.
No, that's it. They were able to kind of change it over.
Yeah, because you're kind of seeing the way your brain kind of goes from one place to another, and as random as it could seem to you, it
Hmm.
really does stem from, this experience. And I do think there are a few, like a decent amount of people who kind of think of um, EMDR as like coming up with like you mentioned hypnosis, and then also like finding repressed memories, which
Right.
is like
No, these aren't repressed at all. We're basically taking the present current trigger experience and having them kind of float back to when they last felt that way. And usually they can come up with that memory where they first felt it. And that's what we use. So it's not a repressed memory. It's something that they probably think about, from time to time. I mean, I've been through it myself.
Mhm.
And there was a memory that I always remembered. It was being on the playground and, all these kids bullying this kid and kind of what happened after that. And it tied to my current beliefs of how other people saw me, so it impacted me. It wasn't super traumatic, but it definitely changed the way I felt about myself in certain situations with people.
Absolutely. That's so
So
cool.
it's so cool. If this sounds cool to any of you, seriously, it's the most interesting thing. And to watch, the best part is to watch these people just figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to tell you this story. Okay, so here's an example of how EMDR can work. This is crazy. And I've seen this happen. So this woman got trained and she was like, hey, she was talking to her friend, and her friend had this intense phobia of elevators. Okay. And she had to go every day to work to the 25th floor. So by the time she got to the top of this 25th floor, she's sweating and she's like, oh, she's so like mortified, right?
Yeah.
Well, her friend, the therapist friend said, hey, how about we try this EMDR therapy, see how it works for you? And they went through a session. It doesn't always go this quickly, but sometimes it can, which is crazy. Sometimes someone can process through something in one session. And other times it can take up to, I've worked for people with months that had a really impactful memory. So anyway, she did it like on a Thursday to this woman. And then Friday, she didn't hear from her. And she was like, okay, whatever. And the weekend passed. And by Monday afternoon, the therapist is calling her friend going, so how was the elevator? Like, you haven't told me anything. And she's like, oh, it was fine. Yeah. And she's like, remember how scared you were? She's like, yes. Oh my gosh. No, it didn't bother me at all. So it wasn't like she forgot that she had the phobia. This was just her new way of seeing the elevator. It was no big deal. She would just go on the elevator.
Wow. That is so cool.
It's like,
So it's commonly used then probably to treat like phobias and then trauma, correct?
yeah, like little traumas, everybody has an experience that impacts something. Like I had to help my kid with the fear of spiders. I don't know where that came from, but we found out the first time they became fearful of the spider. And I was able to do that with my daughter, and it's way better now. She doesn't like scream and run for the hills, So a little spider this big that you can't even see.
Oh yeah. My mom ruined me. My mom was like, she's horrified of spiders or horrified, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just became that way too. And I was like, I used to love bugs. Like, gosh darn it.
Yeah, exactly. I do EMDR with you. Uh-huh.
I know, right? They're just creepy.
They are. They're creepy, but they really mean no harm. Most
Yeah,
of them,
they really don't. In fact, they're generally helpful, but
yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
Well, is there any like kind of advice you want to give students who are interested in MFT, or anything they like, skills they should work on, process to consider, even though there's no linear way like we've kind of discussed throughout?
Yeah, I mean, MFT is great, like I said, because it's basically, you can work with children, you can work with couples, families, individuals. You can work in a nonprofit setting, or you can work like, I think you can even be like, well, the LPCC is a different degree to get to do working as in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
can still work in schools as an MFT. So options are, you know, there's so many options. As far as like advice, like if they're gonna graduate with a psychology degree, and I think this is for State, right? San Diego State has a
BA.
Yeah, it's just a regular. It's more of a research based, though, isn't it?
Yeah, they do put a large emphasis on research. But yeah, it's just a Bachelor of Arts now.
But also, I know that San Diego State does have the social work
Yes.
one, which when I thought of social work, just so you guys know, I thought of, I'd be working like, you know, with CWS, child welfare, and I didn't really want to do social work.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of, you know, colleagues that have their masters and also their, bless you, in social work that are doing exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And they can have their own private practice. So you can do either or, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I love too.
There's a lot of options to get to kind of the same place, which is what makes psychology so awesome and also kind of difficult to figure out where your niche is.
Yeah, I would just say, like, try to figure out what you're interested in while you're going through the, you know, just getting your degree, your BA, and then start looking into, you know, graduate programs for the future or right away or whatever. You know, do what interests you. Really, if you're not doing what your passion is, you're not going to be the best you can be. You know, you have to feel passion for what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So
something I like tend to kind of harp on with my students is, you know, like you need to make the choice on your own. No one should be making your career choice or major choice for you.
Totally.
You want to be doing something that you love as much or almost more than like a significant other or a friend, because if you don't love what you're going to be spending most of your day doing, you're going to bring that home with you every time, and that's going to seep into other relationships. So it's just not worth it to kind of settle or be complacent, right?
No, it's true. My first job, yes, I did not like it, and all I did was moan about that place. And I was unhappy, you know. I was like, I was getting a paycheck, but who cares about money when you're, you know, spending all this time being unhappy, not feeling fulfilled or satisfied or like, yay, I helped someone or whatever it is that you want to do. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the main message here.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything I maybe missed that you wanted to end with, or let's see?
Is this a growing field? Yes, therapy is huge. It's like becoming more accepted by so many more people and cultures and all of that. So yeah, it's growing for sure.
And I like to kind of mention too that a lot of people, especially if you want to work in a nonprofit, they're moving away from psychologists and wanting more master's level clinicians.
Yes.
Rather than someone with a PsyD or a PhD. I'm not trying to deter anyone from doing that.
So true.
Yeah.
And that would be another thing for me personally. I never had the desire to go on to a doctorate because I have enough with what I'm doing now, and this is what I want to do. So I don't need to. It's only to say, I asked somebody, why do you want to go get your doctorate? And they're like, because I want to be called doctor. And I was like,
exactly. That's okay. The reason to do it.
Oh, that's the reason? You're going to go into debt so someone will call you doctor?
Yeah. Never do something for a label. It's just not worth it. And especially like, if you don't love research, a PhD program is probably not where you want to go.
Yeah. Like hands-on, helping the people, and you know, so
absolutely.
Less money too. That's good.
Yeah. All right.
Ending.
Last one. Sorry.
Seeing clients. What makes you want to come to work every day? Ooh. I really get a high off of seeing clients figure stuff out on their own and make those shifts. With the EMDR, you see actual shifts happening. And in any therapy, actually, not just the EMDR. You know, you see have an aha moment or figure out this works for me, and I'm going to do this. And when they say those things, I want to do, and I'm going to do, and I'm feeling this way, that makes it all worthwhile. It really does. You're like, oh, did I have a little hand in that? So it's kind of fun. And I think all the other questions
Yeah.
Explained it all. Wow.
Awesome.
Very good. Whoa.
And then I also like to ask if any students are interested, can I share share your contact with them for questions?
Sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Email, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I finally have the right one. Oh my gosh. I was like, ah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know students are really going to appreciate this. And
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate it. All right. So
Good.
I'm going to start recording.